Stanley thought it was just a mask, but when it fused to his face he became someone or something else. In the opening scene, a scuba diver is depicted struggling to unlock a weathered chest concealed beneath a pile of rocks. Above him, a boat positioned on the water surface is lowering a substantial pipe into the depth. However, a chain unexpectedly snaps, trapping the diver at the ocean floor. At the precise moment when the chest finally opens, an ancient mask emerges, detaching itself and ascending towards the surface. Meanwhile, inside a bank, Stanley Ipkiss, an employee, engages in a conversation with his colleague Maggie. Another co-worker, Charlie, informs Stanley about Peggy's manipulative behavior, prompting him to suggest a night out on the town. Suddenly, rain begins to pour as a captivating woman named Tina enters the bank, captivating both Stanley and Charlie with her presence. Charlie escorts her to Stanley's workstation to discuss the initiation of a fresh account. As Tina engages in flirtatious banter with Stanley, unbeknownst to them, a concealed camera discreetly records footage of the heavily fortified vault inside her handbag. Meanwhile, in a separate office, two individuals, Dorian and Freeze, meticulously scrutinize the incriminating video. Evidently their intentions revolve around orchestrating a heist at the bank. Freeze informs Dorian that their superior, Nico, must grant approval for the scheme. However, Dorian asserts that a paradigm shift is imminent, as he aims to seize control of the entire operation. Stanley makes his way into a dubious automobile repair shop operated by two untrustworthy mechanics. Unfortunately, his own vehicle is still undergoing repairs, prompting them to offer him temporary use of a vehicle called the Loner later that evening. Stanley arrives at the Coco Club in the Loner, a dilapidated and worn-out wreck. Outside the club, he encounters Charlie accompanied by two young women. Charlie bribes Bobby, the club's bouncer, to allow them entry, but Bobby denies Stanley access and forcefully tosses him into the nearby gutter. In that very moment, Tina shows up, causing Stanley great embarrassment. Consequently, he decides to depart in the Loner, leaving behind a trail of smoke. Subsequently, Stanley finds himself driving onto a bridge, only for the Loner to unexpectedly break down. As he steps out of the vehicle, he notices a lifeless body floating in the water below, and rushes down to offer assistance. He makes a startling discovery that instead of a body, there lies a heap of floating debris before him. Amongst the discarded items, he stumbles upon an intriguing mask with a wooden appearance. Stanley returns home, drenched and greeted by Mrs. Peeman, his landlady, who berates him for wetting her rug. Inside his apartment, his dog Milo eagerly jumps up to welcome him. While watching a television interview featuring Dr. Newman discussing the metaphorical use of masks to conceal true personality, Stanley notices Milo's unease towards the mask. Intrigued, Stanley examines it closely, holding it near his face, only to find it inexplicably adhering to his skin. Spinning around the room like a tornado, Stanley's transformation into an enigmatic character with a green face, known as the Mask, leaves Milo scurrying for shelter. Entering the hallway adjacent to Mrs. Peeman's door, chaos ensues. A lively clock emerges from his pocket, compelling him to wield a massive mallet in an attempt to strike it. Startled by his peculiar behavior, Mrs. Peeman unleashes a piercing scream before resorting to firing shots at him. Propelled by an extraordinary force, he bounds down the hallway and leaps through the window, descending onto the road below. Remarkably flattened, he peels himself off the pavement, only to be met with the blaring of a car horn. In response, he retaliates with a resounding blast from his miniature horn, shattering the car's windshield. With the deed done, he calmly walks away from the scene. A gang of delinquents attempts to steal from him, prompting him to sprint down a narrow alley. As they pursue him, eventually caught, he captivates them with his mesmerizing balloon tricks, temporarily diverting their attention. However, the situation takes a startling turn when he transforms one of the gang members into a functioning machine gun and unleashes a volley of bullets upon them. Subsequently, he resolves to visit an automotive workshop where two mechanics await, their fate left unknown for now. The following morning, Stanley awakens in his bed, his memory recalling the events of the previous night. In a hurried state, he rushes towards the mirror, but ultimately dismisses the experiences as nothing more than a dream. A sudden knock reverberates through the door, prompting Stanley to answer. On the other side stands Lieutenant Mitch Kelway, a detective seeking information about the commotion from the previous night. Initially, Stanley claims ignorance, asserting that he heard nothing. However, as the detective vividly describes the events, Stanley's realization dawns that it was far from a mere dream. Glancing at the clock, he panics, realizing that he is running late for work. In haste, he discards the mask out the window, unaware of its peculiar return as he departs. Meanwhile, at the automotive workshop, the two mechanics are transported on stretchers to an awaiting ambulance, bizarrely sporting exhaust pipes protruding from their rear ends. Seizing the opportunity, Peg, a female reporter, surreptitiously enters the scene, keen to explore further. Upon arriving at his workplace, Charlie interrogates Stanley, inquiring about his whereabouts the previous night. Simultaneously, the bank manager confronts Stanley, questioning his tardiness. Amidst this flurry, Peg, the reporter, enters the scene, seeking to interview Stanley regarding the unsettling incident at the car workshop. She discloses that numerous women are actively seeking someone like him, an honest and decent individual. Sharing her contact details on a personal card, Peggy bids farewell. Meanwhile, Dorian pays a visit to his superior, Nico. It becomes apparent that Nico is well aware of Dorian's intentions to seize control. In response, Nico warns Dorian to leave town immediately or face dire consequences during their next encounter. Stanley dozes off in his apartment, engrossed in a dream featuring Tina. In this dream, she licks his ear, but upon waking up, he realizes it's actually his faithful companion, Milo, who was responsible. Observing a newspaper clipping showcasing Tina's performance at the Coco Club, an idea sparks within Stanley. Donning the mask once again, he undergoes a transformative metamorphosis. Although lacking funds, Stanley has a notion of where to acquire some. In the midst of Dorian's gang plotting a bank heist, the mask bursts out of the bank's doors, whirlwind-like, clutching bags of money. As the police arrive, Dorian's gang is left empty-handed. Meanwhile, at the Coco Club, a remarkably lengthy limousine arrives, and the mask emerges from it. He tosses money into the air and proceeds to enter the club. Within its vibrant atmosphere, Tina captivates the audience with her melodious voice clad in an alluring gown. The mask, consumed by fervor, becomes enthralled while observing Tina navigate through the club. Making his way to the band, the mask ignites their performance, inciting a lively ambience. Entwined in a dance with Tina, they twirl in a captivating display of motion. Suddenly, Dorian's gang interrupts, informing Dorian about an individual who absconded with the bank's funds. Sweet Eddie, a member of the gang, points at the mask, proclaiming him as the culprit. Acting on behalf of Nico, Orlando, a henchman, fires a shot at the mask, or so he believes. The mask theatrically feigns his demise, prompting Dorian and Orlando to attempt shooting him as he bounces off. Suddenly, Lieutenant Kelway arrives, accompanied by a police squad, and proceeds to apprehend Dorian and Orlando. During the commotion, Lieutenant Kelway discovers a fragment of Stanley's former pajamas on the floor. The following morning, Stanley remains asleep in his bed, dressed in striped pajamas, while Lieutenant Kelway knocks on the door. As Stanley reaches for clothing from the closet, the bank money hidden within spills onto the floor. After discreetly concealing the money, Stanley finally responds to the door, allowing Kelway to enter promptly. The detective queries Stanley regarding both the bank heist and the enigmatic mask. Meanwhile, Milo persistently attempts to open the closet. Later, at the police station, Kelway and his colleague Doyle review the bank's security footage, capturing the robbery in progress. Subsequently, the scene shifts to Dorian addressing a gathering of menacing individuals, enticing them with a reward of $50,000 for retrieving the mask. Dorian proceeds to interrogate Tina about her intimate encounter with the mask. Stanley visits the bank while the police conduct their investigation. The manager confronts Stanley, berating him for his tardiness. However, in a rare display of assertiveness, Stanley stands up to the manager, firing back. Defeated, the manager retreats. Meanwhile, Charlie engages in a conversation with Stanley when Tina enters the scene. Seizing the opportunity, Stanley escorts Tina upstairs. Intrigued, Tina inquires about the mask, displaying an infatuation towards Stanley. In response, Stanley claims familiarity with the mask and suggests arranging a meeting for her. Before departing, Tina plants a kiss on Stanley's cheek, leaving him behind. Stanley brings the mask to see Dr. Newman, who identifies it as resembling the legendary mask of Loki, the mischievous Norse god. However, when Stanley attempts to demonstrate its powers, nothing occurs, leading Dr. Newman to dismiss Stanley as a delusional individual. In order to get Stanley to leave, Dr. Newman claims that he and the mask are inseparable entities. Exiting the office, Stanley hails a taxi while being monitored by Kelway and Doyle hidden amongst bushes at the park. They observe Stanley's actions. As Tina arrives and they sit together on a bench, Stanley's discomfort grows, prompting him to express his intention to depart before the mask's arrival. He swiftly retreats behind bushes, emerging transformed into the mask. Attempting to initiate a kiss, Stanley receives a painful blow as Tina knees him in the groin. Her fondness for appears to have vanished instantly. Suddenly, Kelway, Doyle, and a group of police officers emerge, promptly arresting the mask. At the newspaper office, Peggy's boss Murray informs her that Stanley has been apprehended by the police. Expressing her urgent need for the story, he grants her permission to pursue it. In the park, two police officers thoroughly search the mask, discovering a multitude of peculiar items, including a photograph of Kelway's wife. Swiftly, the mask performs a cunning maneuver, deftly transferring the handcuffs onto Kelway and Doyle before spinning away towards the park gates. In a surprising twist, the mask barricades the gates, only to find an array of law enforcement officers aiming their weapons at him, seemingly every cop in town. Abruptly, the mask adorns a flamenco costume and bursts into an exotic dance. Astonishingly, the police officers join in, singing and dancing to the infectious rhythm. However, the merriment is short-lived as Kelway and Doyle emerge from the park, putting an end to the revelry. In a desperate bid to escape, the mask darts down an alley with the officers in pursuit. At a critical moment, Stanley manages to remove the mask, just as Peggy arrives in her car, calling out to him. Swiftly, he jumps into the vehicle, evading the gunfire from the pursuing cops. The scene shifts to Stanley and Peggy conversing in the newspaper's warehouse, as she professes her deep affection for him. Unbeknownst to Stanley, it is a deceitful lie. In a twist of fate, Peggy has betrayed him, having sold him out to Dorian for the enticing sum of $50,000. To make matters worse, they forcefully escort Stanley to the printing machinery, suspending him until he reveals the mask's usage to Dorian. Dorian dons the mask, undergoing a dramatic transformation into a formidable criminal. Accompanied by Dorian's henchmen, Stanley is taken to his apartment to retrieve the stolen bank funds. Orlando and another thug retrieve the money from the closet, while Milo observes the proceedings. Noticing Stanley in the car downstairs, Milo quietly slips out the door. As the vehicle speeds away, Milo tails it persistently. During their escape, they pass by the police station, where they eject Stanley onto Kelway, who promptly brings him inside and confines him. Meanwhile, Milo lurks in the alley nearby Stanley's cell. In a separate development, Tina arrives at the station, intending to visit Stanley. Expressing her true feelings, she confides in Stanley that he is the one she genuinely cares for, not the mask. As she departs, Dorian's thugs give chase, catching Stanley's attention. In the alley, Dorian locates Tina and forcefully places her inside his car. Acting swiftly, Stanley directs Milo to leap up to the cell window. Milo retrieves the keys, allowing Stanley to escape and acquire the officer's firearm. Just as Kelway enters, Stanley handcuffs himself to him, and together they depart from the police station in search of Tina. The scene transitions to the Coco Bongo Club. Owned by Dorian's superior, Nico, Mayor Tilton and other influential members of the city gather there, aiming to raise funds for the war orphans cause. Charlie is present at the club, thoroughly enjoying himself. Dorian, now donning the mask, forcefully breaches the doors alongside his gang, triggering a fierce gunfight with Nico and his men. In a surprising turn, Nico shoots at Dorian, but the mask shields him, allowing him to retaliate by spitting the bullets back at Nico, resulting in his demise. Meanwhile, outside the club, Stanley arrives, leaving Kelway handcuffed in the car with Milo. He enters the establishment, armed with a gun. Subduing a thug, Stanley acquires his firearm and proceeds to locate Charlie, entrusting him with the weapon. Spotting the masked Dorian, Stanley witnesses him tying Tina to an artificial coconut tree, while setting explosives nearby, scheduled to detonate in a mere 10 minutes. Orlando apprehends Stanley and escorts him to Dorian's presence. In the car, Milo skillfully unlocks the door and dashes towards the club. While Stanley remains under Orlando's grasp, Tina conceives an idea. She requests a final kiss from Dorian, not wearing the mask, longing to embrace the old Dorian she once loved. As Dorian removes the mask for the kiss, Tina seizes the opportunity, freeing one of her legs to deliver a forceful kick, propelling the mask through the air. Amidst the ensuing chaos of everyone attempting to seize it, it is Milo who leaps up and snatches the mask. Stanley instructs Milo to flee while he endeavors to untie Tina. However, Dorian initiates a confrontation, engaging in a fight with Stanley. Simultaneously, as Sweet Eddie tries to seize Milo, the courageous Kaning dons the mask, transforming into a ferocious and determined force. Stanley incapacitates Dorian, then signals Milo. He swiftly retrieves the mask from Milo. In the midst of the chaos, Orlando fires at the mask, propelling it behind a nearby bar, with Stanley closely trailing behind. Both unleash a barrage of bullets, but the mask re-emerges from its hiding spot. Just as they prepare to fire once more, the mask astoundingly reveals 2 handfuls of oversized guns and rocket launchers. Startled, Orlando and the others hastily retreat. However, it turns out that the masked weaponry was merely an illusion. With the urgency of the explosive's imminent detonation, Tina calls out to the mask. In an instant, he arrives and ingests the explosives, which erupt within his stomach. Although emitting some smoke and fire, he emerges unscathed. Dorian brandishes a knife, but Milo's bark alerts the mask, who swiftly paints a symbol resembling a flushing toilet on the tree. As Dorian plunges into the pond, the mask flushes him away. Stanley removes the mask, but before he can embrace Tina, Charlie arrives accompanied by the police, ready to apprehend the thugs. Outside the club, Kellaway is about to arrest Stanley, but he collides with Mayor Tilton. The mayor insists that Dorian, not Stanley, is the mask as he witnessed it firsthand. According to the mayor, Stanley is a hero for saving them from Dorian and his gang. Now Stanley, Tina, Charlie and Milo drive onto a bridge. Tina hurls the mask into the river and shares a passionate kiss with Stanley. Meanwhile, Charlie has his own plan, and dives into the river after the mask. However, Milo outpaces him, swimming away with the mask. And that's a wrap for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed our journey through the story of this film. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more movie narrations. Until next time.